So, I've been wrestling with something for a while now, and I don't know who else to talk to. My wife, Jessica, and I have been together for about 10 years. We've got 2 kids, a house, the whole picture-perfect deal. Or at least, I thought we did. It all started a few months ago when things started feeling off. At first, it was just small stuff. You know, little changes that you try to brush off. Maybe it's just the stress of life or the kids or whatever. But then, it started building up. Jessica started working late a lot more. At first, I figured it was the usual rush at her job, but it was every week. She'd get home later and later, and when she did, she was exhausted but in a weird way, like she was overcompensating for something. Like she'd smile a little too much or act overly cheerful, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but it didn't sit right with me. Then there were the solo errands. She'd leave at random times, with no real explanation. Things like, "Oh, I'm just running to the store to grab some things," but then be gone for hours. I don't know about you, but I've never needed hours to buy toilet paper and milk. And when I'd ask what she was up to, she'd just give me this look, kind of annoyed, like I was being unreasonable for wondering where she'd been. And there's the phone. Don't get me wrong, I never pried into her phone before. We've always had that kind of relationship where we trust each other, or at least that's what I thought. But suddenly, she was so protective of it. She'd put it face down when it was near me. If I came into the room while she was texting, she'd quickly shove it in her pocket. Stuff like that. It sounds petty, but it felt off. At first I thought, maybe she's just stressed out. Maybe she just needs space. I can handle it. It's probably nothing. But then one night, I walked into the kitchen to grab a snack, and she was sitting at the table, texting like mad. She didn't notice me come in, and I swear, there was something in the way she looked at her phone, like she was nervous or guilty. When she saw me, she quickly locked it and shoved it into her bag like it was the most normal thing in the world. It was such a small moment, but something about it just clicked in my head. I don't know if it was my gut or just a feeling, but I suddenly felt like I was on the outside of something. I told myself I was overthinking it, that it's probably just me being paranoid, but the more I thought about it, the more I started noticing these little cracks. And if I'm being honest, I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't even know what I was supposed to fix. That's where this whole thing started, this sinking feeling that I couldn't shake. What do I do? Do I just let it go? Is she really just stressed, or am I missing something here? I don't know, but I'm starting to feel like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't control. Anyway, that's where things started. I'll get into the next part later, but I just had to get this off my chest. It's like, when you feel something's wrong, but you don't know what it is yet. It's a damn uncomfortable place to be. So, I've been sitting on all these weird feelings for a while now, and honestly, it's been messing with my head. I'm not a paranoid guy, at least, I didn't think I was. But the more Jessica started acting distant, the more I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that something was off. I tried talking to her a couple of times, just in passing, you know? Small conversations like, "Hey, how's work going?" Or "You seem a little stressed lately, everything okay?" But she'd brush it off with a "Yeah, just busy." You know how it is, and that would be the end of it. No real discussion, no deeper conversation, just a quick dodge. But then came the night I almost didn't believe what I saw. Jessica had gone out with some friends. She said it was a girls' night, nothing unusual, and I didn't think much of it at first. But as the night went on, I started feeling a little weird. She wasn't texting me like she normally does when she's out. No "Hey, I'm on my way home," or "I'll be late," like usual. Nothing. It was already after midnight, and I still hadn't heard from her. Now, I don't usually track her every move. I don't go through her things. But this night, for whatever reason, I felt this strange pull. So, I checked her location on Find My Friends. Just to see where she was. No big deal, right? I don't know what I thought I was going to find. Maybe she was just running late or hanging out longer than expected. But when I saw her location, I froze. She was at a hotel. A hotel. At 1 a.m. It wasn't a place she'd mentioned going to, and I knew for a fact it wasn't a work thing. She'd never said anything about staying out of town. And I don't want to sound dramatic, but my heart dropped. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to make sense of it. Was it a mistake? Was she just there to meet a friend or grab a drink? But deep down I knew. It wasn't a mistake. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. For a long while, I couldn't even bring myself to call her. I just kept staring at the map, watching the little on my phone hover over that hotel, feeling like I was sinking into this deep, dark hole. It wasn't like I had any proof of anything. Hell, she could have been meeting someone for work, or maybe she just needed a place to crash. But the idea of her being at a hotel so late, without telling me, just didn't sit right. Eventually, I did text her, trying to sound casual. Something like, "Hey, where are you? It's pretty late. Everything good?" But I didn't get a reply for a while. And when she did finally respond, she was all weird about it. She said she'd just been catching up with some old friends, and that the hotel was just a place they hung out at. No details. No names. No explanation. I didn't press her too much, but I wasn't buying it. That hotel wasn't where her friends usually hung out, and even if it was, I'd never heard her mention it before. It felt like a cover-up. And she sounded annoyed that I'd even ask. I was confused, hurt, and honestly, a little scared. I knew deep down this wasn't just a misunderstanding, but the thought of her actually cheating. I couldn't even say it out loud. It felt like too much. Like I wasn't ready to face that kind of truth. I told myself it was probably just an isolated incident. But I couldn't shake it. I felt like a fool just sitting here wondering what the hell was going on. So I decided to do what I never thought I'd do. I started looking into things a little deeper. And that's where I'm at now. It feels wrong, but at the same time, I can't just let it slide. I don't know what I'm hoping to find, but I can't shake the feeling that something's not right. I'm not proud of it, but I guess I'm starting to wonder if I need to start finding out the truth, no matter what. Alright, so things didn't get any clearer after that hotel night. If anything, they just got worse. The way Jessica acted the next day was strange. She was overly cheerful when she got home, almost too cheerful, like she was trying to make up for something. It felt like she was laying it on thick, like she thought if she acted normal enough, I wouldn't ask questions. But I still had that sinking feeling. I couldn't shake it. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. I know, it sounds bad. But I was losing my mind at this point. I didn't have any answers, and it was eating at me. Every time I looked at her, I wondered, is she really my wife, or is she someone else entirely? So one night, after the kids were asleep and she went to take a shower, I grabbed her phone off the counter. I told myself it was just to check on the grocery list or maybe a random text she left open from earlier. I had all these excuses in my head, but the truth was, I needed to know. I needed to see for myself if there was anything, that would confirm what I was already starting to suspect. I opened her messages. At first, there were just some texts from her sister, nothing weird. Then, I started scrolling through more recent conversations. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until I got to the very bottom. There it was. A message from a guy. His name wasn't familiar to me, so I clicked on it. And I almost threw the phone across the room. The conversation was full of those flirty heart-eye emojis, inside jokes, and things I'd never heard her say to me. They were talking about meeting up at a hotel and taking things slow because she didn't want to mess up her family, but it seemed like she was still all in. I won't go into all the details, but just reading it made my stomach turn. I stood there frozen, staring at the screen. I couldn't breathe for a second. I didn't know whether to feel angry, sad, or just numb. I mean, I had suspected something, but seeing it laid out in front of me, right there in black and white, made it real. I checked the phone logs after that. Calls. Texts. It was the same number, over and over. This guy had been calling her in the middle of the day, sending late-night texts, and worst of all, she deleted most of them. But not all. A couple slipped through the cracks. And even though I wanted to stop, I couldn't help myself. I felt like I had to know. She came out of the shower not long after that. When she saw me sitting on the couch, holding her phone, her face went completely blank. She didn't say anything right away, and I could feel the tension in the air. It was like everything in the room was suffocating me. My mouth went dry. I wanted to scream, to ask her what the hell was going on, but I couldn't make myself say anything. She eventually walked over, acting like nothing was wrong, but the way she avoided looking me in the eye told me everything I needed to know. Then she said something so casual that it sent a chill through me. "What are you doing with my phone?" I looked at her, heart pounding, and for a moment, I thought about just confronting her, demanding the truth. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just that part of me that still wanted to believe in her, in us. I was just looking at your texts, I said, the words coming out like gravel. You were texting someone a lot. She immediately got defensive. What? Are you seriously snooping through my phone now? What is wrong with you? Why would you do that? Her reaction hit me like a slap in the face. She was angry, defensive, not surprised, not apologetic. She was just pissed that I'd caught her. I didn't mean to go through your messages, Jessica. But you've been acting weird lately, I said, trying to stay calm, though my voice was shaky. The late nights, the hotel. You don't just go to a hotel in the middle of the night to hang out with friends. At this point, I was shaking. My mind was racing. I wanted to get angry, but I didn't even know how to do it without falling apart. It felt like she was slipping away from me, and I couldn't even get a grip on why. She let out a big sigh, rolling her eyes. Oh my God, Tom. You're being ridiculous. That was just some stupid old guy friend from college. Nothing's going on. You're overreacting. She tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced. And her eyes, there was no guilt, no shame, just annoyance. She acted like I was the one who was crazy, like I was the one in the wrong. But I knew there was more to it. I had the proof. It was right there, in my hands. But at that moment, I didn't know what to do with it. Do I confront her? Do I ask her to tell me the truth? Do I even want to hear the truth? I just stood there, holding the phone in my hand, feeling like a damn fool. This was the point of no return, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to cross it. So, after that night with the phone, things got weird. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect her to act like I was the crazy one. She kept playing it off like I was being ridiculous. I mean, she literally rolled her eyes and said, "You're overreacting, Tom. It's nothing." But here's the thing, if it was nothing, then why was she so defensive? Why wouldn't she just sit down and explain things calmly if there was nothing going on? Instead, she just kept saying the same thing over and over. It's nothing. You're crazy. It's just an old friend. Nothing's happening. And she gets so frustrated with me, like I was bothering her by asking questions. The worst part was the way she'd twist things. If I brought up the hotel or those late-night texts again, she'd say stuff like, "I don't know why you're being so insecure. Are you trying to control me? Do you think I can't have friends without you freaking out?" She'd turn it around like I was the one doing something wrong for just asking. I'd try to stay calm, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Every time I tried to ask her about that guy, or about her disappearing for hours, she'd deflect or make me feel guilty for even questioning her. It was like she was planting seeds of doubt in my head. And I'll admit, I started to second-guess myself. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I had no reason to feel like this. I couldn't decide if I was being gaslit or if I was losing my mind. Things got tense after that. We barely talked outside of the basic stuff. Work, the kids, meals. Everything else felt off. Whenever I'd try to make a joke or be affectionate, she'd pull back or get annoyed. It was like I couldn't win. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something was going on. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. I kept going back to that hotel receipt. She hadn't told me where she was that night, and it was bugging me. I wanted to confront her again, but I was scared. Scared of what she'd say, scared of what the truth would be. So I kept quiet, but inside it was eating me up. I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was okay. I honestly didn't think things could get worse, but they did. One evening, Jessica came home from work late, again, and I had this horrible gut feeling. She had a weird look on her face, like she was trying to hide something, but I couldn't put my finger on it. She walked past me without saying much, just a quick, "Hey, I'm tired, I'm going to bed early," like everything was normal. But I noticed she was acting distant. Like really distant. And that was it. The last straw. I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to ask her directly. I waited until the kids were in bed, trying to hold my breath and calm my nerves. When I finally spoke up, my voice felt shaky, but I knew I had to do it. "Jess," I said, "I need to ask you something. What's really going on? I know you've been distant lately. I know you're hiding something." She froze, her hand on the doorknob of the bedroom. Her body went stiff, and I could see her trying to figure out how to lie her way out of it. She turned slowly to face me. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not hiding anything, Tom. You're being paranoid again." "Don't do this, Jessica," I said, trying to stay calm even though I felt like I was about to explode. I know about the hotel. I know about the texts. You're acting like you're hiding something, and I just need to hear the truth. Please. Her eyes widened for a split second, and then that familiar defensive look took over. What are you talking about? She snapped, her voice suddenly cold. You're insane. I told you, it was nothing. It's not what you think. Why are you doing this to me? I took a deep breath. This wasn't the conversation I wanted to have, but I was done dancing around it. So what's the guy's name? Why are you texting him all the time? Why the hotel, Jess? Why do you keep lying to me? Her face twisted, and she actually laughed. It wasn't a real laugh, though. It was mocking. Oh, I see now. You've really lost it. You're jealous of someone I've known for years? Pathetic. The way she said that word, pathetic, cut through me like a knife. She didn't care about me. She wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. She was just angry that I was catching on. I'm not jealous, Jess. I'm just trying to understand what the hell is going on, I said, trying to keep the tears from spilling. I love you. And I can't keep living like this. This thing between us. It's not normal. She just shook her head like I was the one who was crazy. God, you're unbelievable. Fine, if you want to make a big deal out of nothing, go ahead. You're going to ruin this for everyone, Tom. You're ruining us. Her words hit me like a punch. Ruin us? I was the one who was ruining everything? I was the one who had caught her, who was trying to find answers, and somehow I was the bad guy? I stood there in silence for a minute, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. It felt like all the love and trust I'd put into this marriage had evaporated in an instant. And then she walked away. Just like that. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just left the room and went to bed. And I stood there in the hallway, completely paralyzed. I don't know how long I stood there, but it felt like hours. I had the evidence in my hands, the proof that she was lying to me, but I couldn't even move to confront her properly. I was just so emotionally drained. I kept thinking, how did we get here? How did this person, this woman I'd married, become someone I couldn't trust? But now it was real. I couldn't deny it anymore. Something had changed in her, and in me. And I didn't know what came next. It was the point where I knew the marriage was already broken, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go yet. Maybe I couldn't. Maybe I wasn't strong enough. But the truth was right in front of me, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The days that followed felt like they were dragging on, each one heavier than the last. Jessica and I barely spoke after that confrontation. It wasn't like we were fighting, at least not in the way I expected. It was worse. There was this coldness, like we were both just going through the motions. She'd smile and act normal around the kids, but it felt so forced. I couldn't look at her without thinking about everything I'd found. The hotel. The texts. The lies. She acted like nothing happened, like she hadn't just blown me off and called me insane for asking the simplest questions. And somehow, that made it worse. It was like she was pretending nothing was wrong, and I just had to pretend along with her. But inside, I was falling apart. I'd lay in bed next to her at night, her back turned toward me, and I'd just stare at the ceiling, wondering where we went wrong. Did I miss the signs? Was I too busy with work, with the kids, with life to see what was happening? Was this my fault? I kept going over everything, replaying moments in my head. Maybe I had pushed her away. Maybe I'd been so caught up in the routine of our life that I didn't notice she was slipping. But that didn't excuse the things she was doing. She was being deliberately distant, like she didn't care anymore. And that stung more than anything. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel this huge wave of guilt. I knew she was hiding something, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to pull the trigger and blow everything up. I kept asking myself, what happens if I'm wrong? What if she's right? What if I'm just overreacting? What if this is all in my head? Maybe I had no right to be snooping. Maybe I should just let it go. But I couldn't. The proof was there, and I couldn't ignore it. I found myself staring at the messages again, the ones I'd saved on her phone. I kept thinking, what now? Do I confront her? Do I try to save us? Or do I walk away and end it right here? The problem was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I was so angry, but I was also so damn hurt. And there was this nagging voice in the back of my head telling me that maybe, just maybe, things could be fixed. Maybe it wasn't too late to make things right. Maybe she could apologize, and we could try to work through it. But how do you even begin to fix something like this? I didn't even know where to start. And the longer I waited, the worse it felt. Every time I saw her, every time she said something that sounded too casual, too off, it felt like a reminder of the betrayal that was hanging over our heads. And then there were the kids. How the hell do I explain this to them if things fall apart? They don't deserve to see us like this. They don't deserve to have their lives turned upside down because their parents can't get it together. So, I waited. I kept looking at the evidence, kept thinking about what I'd learned, but I didn't know what I should do next. Part of me wanted to confront her, call it all out and end this farce of a marriage. But the other part of me kept hoping there'd be some miracle, some way we could fix this. It felt like I was stuck in this limbo, paralyzed by my own emotions. I wanted answers. I needed answers. But I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to hear them. I think I hit my breaking point when I found myself sitting on the couch, staring at the same damn hotel receipt that had started all of this. I kept telling myself that I needed to confront Jessica, to ask her outright, but I kept dragging my feet. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. That night, Jessica had gone out with friends again, at least, that's what she said. I didn't believe her anymore, not after everything. The kids were in bed, and I was alone, running through all the possible scenarios in my head. My stomach was in knots. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just keep living like this, pretending nothing was wrong. I decided finally that I had to know. I needed to know if she was still seeing him, if she was still lying to me. When she came home late, I wasn't surprised by her coldness. She didn't even look at me. Just went straight to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and sat down at the table. The silence between us was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the kitchen and put the hotel receipt down in front of her. "Explain this," I said, my voice low but firm. She looked at it for a moment, then back at me, like she was trying to figure out how to lie her way out of it. "It's nothing, Tom. I already told you that. Why can't you just let it go?" I stared at her, my heart pounding. "It's not nothing, Jess. This is real. You went to a hotel. Why?" She stood up, shaking her head. "You really don't trust me anymore, do you?" Her words hit like a slap. It was like I didn't even know her anymore. "I trusted you, Jessica. I trusted you more than anyone. But you've been lying to me. You're hiding something." "I can't just ignore that," I said, the anger rising in my chest. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "Stop lying to me. Just tell me the truth, and we can figure this out." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, she finally spoke. "I don't know what you want from me, Tom. I'm sorry. It's over. Can't you just let it go?" And that was it. The weight of her words crashed over me, and it felt like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. I didn't have to hear any more. I didn't need her to say anything else. It was over. I could feel it. I didn't want it to be over. Hell, I was desperate for it not to be over. But deep down I knew. I wasn't sure where we'd go from here. I wasn't even sure if I could trust myself to make the right choice. But I knew one thing, the truth was out now. And nothing would ever be the same. The next few days were a blur. Jessica and I barely spoke after that night. It was like we were two strangers sharing the same space, both avoiding the elephant in the room. I think we both knew what had just happened, but neither of us knew how to move forward. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was the image of her sitting there, cold and distant, telling me to just let it go. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. But also, there was this deep, aching sadness that I couldn't shake. The worst part was that I had no idea what to do next. Part of me wanted to pack my bags and walk out the door, but another part of me, maybe the stupid part, kept holding on to this tiny shred of hope. Maybe she'd wake up and apologize. Maybe she'd realize what she was throwing away. But the longer I waited, the more I realized I was just kidding myself. One morning, after another night of barely sleeping, I finally decided to do something. I needed to talk to her, really talk to her. So, I asked her to sit down with me after work. When she walked in, she was still acting distant, like she didn't care. She sat across from me, arms crossed, looking like she was bracing for a fight. "I can't keep doing this, Jessica," I said, my voice rough. "We're not okay. I don't even know who you are anymore." She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me, like she was waiting for me to break down or beg her to stay. But I wasn't going to do that. Not anymore. "You can't keep lying to me, Jess. You can't keep doing this to us," I continued. "I want to know if you're willing to fix this, or if we're done." She sighed like I was asking for the world. "I don't know what you want me to say, Tom. I'm sorry if I hurt you. But I didn't want to ruin everything. I didn't think it'd get this far." Her words were like knives in my chest. She was sorry, but she wasn't sorry enough to stop it from happening in the first place. I just stared at her. "I don't think I can do this anymore." The words came out before I even realized what I was saying. But it was true. I didn't think I could keep living like this. Not with the lies, not with the distance, not with the betrayal hanging over us. "I don't want to lose you, Tom." "I don't," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. It was like she was saying the words she thought I wanted to hear, not what she actually meant. I shook my head. "It's not just about not wanting to lose me. It's about what we're doing to each other. What we've done." She didn't say anything else after that. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, neither of us knowing how to fix something that felt so broken. The conversation ended in a way that felt unfinished, like neither of us had actually gotten to the heart of the problem. I still didn't have answers, and she still wasn't giving me a straight one. But I knew this. I couldn't keep waiting for her to change. I couldn't keep hoping she'd wake up and realize what she was throwing away. I was done waiting. And now, I just had to figure out what the hell to do next. After that conversation, things stayed stagnant. Jessica still didn't seem all that invested in fixing anything. I kept waking up in the same house, going through the same motions, but it felt like I was living in a shadow. The love, the connection, everything that used to be between us, it was gone. And no amount of pretending could bring it back. A couple days after that, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the papers from the kids' school. I should have been focused on their homework, or the bills, or something. But instead, I kept thinking about how everything had changed. How the life we had built together, the family, the trust, it felt like it was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't stop it. That's when it hit me. I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would magically fix itself. Jessica wasn't going to change, at least not for me. And maybe she didn't want to anymore. The emotional distance between us was too wide, and I was exhausted from trying to fill that gap. But walking away? That felt impossible. We had kids together, years of history, a whole life built on promises. How could I just throw that away? I don't think Jessica understood how deeply this hurt me. She kept acting like I was the one who was overreacting, like I was the one who was wrong for questioning everything. She never seemed truly sorry for what she'd done, just sorry that I found out. And that realization stung more than anything. I needed space to think. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my brother Mike. I hadn't spoken to him much lately, but I needed advice, someone who could see this from the outside. I needed to know if I was being unreasonable. When he picked up, I could barely speak. It was like the words were stuck in my throat. But I told him everything, everything. The late nights, the texts, the hotel, the lies. "You've got to do what's best for you, Tom," Mike said, his voice steady. "I know it's hard, but you can't stay in this. You don't deserve to feel like that. You're not crazy for questioning her." It wasn't the solution I was looking for, but it was the truth. I had to decide if I was willing to keep fighting for something that might never come back, or if it was time to walk away and start fresh, for myself and for the kids. I sat there for hours, the phone call still echoing in my head. What was the right choice? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing: I couldn't keep being stuck in this limbo. Something had to change, and it was up to me to decide what that would be. The next day, I started looking at apartments. Just a small step, but it felt like the first one in the right direction. Maybe I wasn't ready to fully give up yet, but I couldn't ignore the reality anymore. I didn't know if it was the end, but it was the beginning of something new, whether I liked it or not. And I wasn't sure I did, but I couldn't keep pretending. The decision to leave wasn't one big, dramatic moment. It wasn't some huge confrontation or an angry packing session. It happened quietly, slowly. And when it came time for me to walk out the door, I did it with a kind of numb resignation. That night, I packed up a few things: clothes, my laptop, some personal items. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want the kids to see. I didn't want Jessica to know I was already done. Not yet. I remember standing in the kitchen, looking at her. She was sitting at the counter, scrolling through her phone, just like she always did after dinner. Her back was to me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew something was off. Maybe she even knew I was leaving. I'm going to stay with Mike for a few days, I said, trying to sound casual, like it was no big deal. I just need some space. She didn't look up. Okay. Whatever. I guess we're really doing this then. Her voice was cold, almost dismissive, like she didn't even care. I could feel my heart breaking all over again. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded, grabbed my bag, and left. The drive to Mike's place felt surreal. I wasn't even thinking about the road ahead. I was just going through the motions. My brain was spinning, trying to process everything that had happened. I didn't know if I was making the right choice. But I did know one thing: I couldn't keep living like I had been. I couldn't keep pretending that the trust and love we once shared were still there. I think that was the hardest part, the finality of it. The fact that once I left, there was no going back. At least not in the same way. I couldn't undo the last few months. I couldn't unsee the lies or the betrayal. And I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Mike's place was just a small apartment, nothing fancy. But when I walked in, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. It wasn't that I wanted to leave my family, but I needed to be out of that house, away from the tension, away from the constant uncertainty. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I spent time with Mike, talked through everything, and tried to figure out what came next. But there was still a part of me that couldn't fully accept it. I still had moments of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Should I have given her one more chance? But when I checked my phone later that week and saw the messages from Jessica, I realized that nothing was really going to change. She was still acting like she was the victim. The messages were vague and full of guilt-tripping. "Why are you doing this, Tom? We can't just throw everything away. You're making a mistake." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew the words wouldn't matter. Not anymore. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to feel bitter. But I was. And that's the hardest part. Not the anger toward her, but the anger toward myself for not seeing the truth sooner. And even now, after all the time that's passed, I'm still not sure if I made the right choice. There's no handbook for how to handle a broken marriage, no clear-cut guide on what comes next. I don't know if walking away was the right decision. Maybe it wasn't. But I do know that I couldn't stay in that mess anymore. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll work things out, maybe we won't. But for now, I've taken the first step. And that's something, I guess. The next few days felt like I was in a fog. I stayed with Mike for a while, just trying to get my head straight. He didn't push me to talk, which was a relief. He knew I wasn't ready to hash out everything yet. We'd go for beers, talk about random stuff, and he'd let me ramble when I needed to. It was the first time in a while that I didn't feel like I was drowning in all the things left unsaid between Jessica and me. But then, the silence hit. I didn't hear from Jessica for a couple of days. No calls, no texts. It was like I didn't even exist to her anymore. And it was strange. On one hand, I wanted her to reach out, to show that she cared, to try to fix things. On the other hand, I was relieved. The silence meant I didn't have to deal with her pretending everything was fine. Then, out of nowhere, she sent me a message one night. "I still don't understand why you're doing this. We can fix this, can't we?" I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over. I had my phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I knew she was trying to guilt-trip me again. The old Jessica, the one who could twist things just enough to make me question myself, was back. And I wasn't falling for it this time. I didn't respond. And honestly, I don't even know why I didn't. Maybe I was just tired of the back and forth, tired of the emotional games. Maybe I finally realized that nothing would change until she decided to change. But it was still painful to see that message, to realize how much she wanted to avoid taking responsibility. It wasn't even about fixing the marriage anymore. It was about trust, about knowing that I couldn't keep ignoring the truth. And the truth was that we were broken. Not just because of what happened with her and the affair, but because we'd stopped seeing each other. We'd stopped trying. Mike and I ended up having a long talk that night. I was still on the fence about everything, about what came next, whether to go back and try again or start fresh. He told me something that stuck. You can't fix something that's already broken, man. You just have to decide whether you're done or not. And that was the turning point. I realized I didn't need to keep waiting for something that wasn't coming. I didn't have to keep questioning my decisions. I had to focus on myself and the future, not live in the past anymore. I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know if I'd ever fully heal from all of this. But I knew for the first time in a long time, I couldn't keep waiting around for things to change. I needed to move forward. I still don't know if I'm making the right choice. But I'm done second-guessing myself. It's time to figure out what life looks like after this. The hardest part of all this wasn't the anger or the betrayal, it was the uncertainty. I kept thinking, what now? Do I really move on? Is it even possible after everything? And the kids. What do I tell them? I didn't have all the answers, but one thing became clear, I couldn't stay stuck. I had to start thinking about my future, not just the past. I decided to start by making some changes. First, I got serious about finding a place of my own. I wasn't ready to fully walk away from everything, but I needed space. Something small. Somewhere I could breathe without the constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Mike helped me look around, and after a few weeks, I found a small 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I spent a whole Saturday moving my stuff in, and it felt good to finally take control of something, even if it was just the place I was going to sleep. Jessica called again. I was starting to expect it at this point. Her guilt trips, her questions, her vague promises that things could be better if I just gave her another chance. This time, I picked up. "I'm not coming back, Jessica," I said, my voice steady but not cold. "I can't. This isn't just about what happened between us. It's everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then she said, "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then you shouldn't have done it in the first place," I replied, not even feeling the sting anymore. It wasn't worth it to argue. "I still care about you," she said, but the words felt empty now. "I know," I said quietly. "But it's not enough anymore." That was it. No dramatic goodbye, no messy confrontation. I hung up, and something inside me felt lighter. It wasn't a happy feeling, but it was a step toward closing the door on a chapter that had been dragging me down for too long. I spent the next few weeks getting settled in my new place, focusing on the kids, trying to build some kind of routine. They still didn't fully understand what was going on, and I wasn't sure how to explain it. But I knew one thing, I had to keep it together for them. In the meantime, Jessica stayed distant. We only communicated about the kids, which I guess was a relief in its own way. Every time we spoke, I felt like I was talking to a stranger. The woman I married was still there somewhere, but it wasn't the same. I wasn't sure what the future held. I wasn't even sure if I was ready for it. But I knew I was done pretending everything was fine. I was moving on, one step at a time. And for the first time in months, I wasn't looking back. It's been a couple of months now, and honestly, things are still up in the air. The apartment's starting to feel more like home, and the kids are adjusting, though there are still some rough days. I try to keep things as normal as possible for them, but there's no pretending that everything's fine. They're old enough to notice the tension, and I can tell they're still trying to make sense of it all. Jessica and I talk less. I'm not sure what I expected, maybe some big heartfelt apology or an attempt to fix things, but it hasn't happened. She still sends me texts now and then about the kids, but there's nothing more. We're just parents now. Nothing more, nothing less. Some days, I feel guilty. I feel like I should have tried harder to make it work, that I didn't fight for the family enough. But then I remember the lies, the coldness, the distance that was growing between us even before everything blew up. And I think, maybe this was the only way. I've started taking care of myself a little more. I've been working out again, trying to get my head right. I signed up for therapy a few weeks ago. I don't think I'm ready to dive into another relationship anytime soon, but I do want to heal. I want to be whole again for me, and for the kids. The other day, I ran into Jessica at the store. It was awkward. She looked at me like she wasn't sure what to say. I just nodded, kept it brief, and moved on. No need for words that didn't matter anymore. I don't know where this all ends. Maybe things will get easier, or maybe they won't. But I'm learning to take it one day at a time. I'm figuring out who I am outside of that marriage, and while it's hard, it's also freeing in a way. I don't have the answers yet. But I know I'm starting to find my own peace, even if it's slow and messy. The worst is behind me, and I'm just trying to keep moving forward, whatever that looks like. The hardest part, honestly, is not knowing what comes next. I've gotten better at handling the day-to-day stuff, taking care of the kids, keeping a roof over our heads, doing what needs to be done, but the bigger picture still feels like a giant question mark. Jessica and I barely talk, and when we do, it's about the kids, like some kind of business transaction. I can feel the coldness between us, and it's like the whole relationship has turned into this dull ache. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not sad either. I just feel tired. I still haven't told anyone the full story. Mike knows most of it, but even with him, there are things I haven't said. I don't know how to explain the feeling of being lied to by someone you thought you could trust with everything. Even now, I wonder if I'm missing something. Did I overlook something obvious? Maybe I could have fixed it if I'd tried harder. But the truth is, I'm starting to realize that no matter how much I beat myself up, nothing changes. Jessica made her choices, and now I have to make mine. And my choice is to keep moving forward. The kids are doing better. They're adjusting. They miss their mom, of course, but they're learning to cope. They've got a good routine, and I think that helps. But some nights, when they're asleep and I'm sitting alone, I can't help but feel the weight of it all. I guess I'm learning that healing doesn't happen in big moments. It's the little things, making it through a day without feeling like I'm drowning, finding some peace in my new life, being okay with the fact that some days are harder than others. There's still a part of me that wonders if Jessica will ever regret what she did, if she'll ever really understand the damage she caused. But I don't have the energy for that anymore. What matters now is my healing. It's about figuring out who I am again, not just as a husband or a father, but as me. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I'll ever be completely there. But I'm getting there, one small step at a time. And that's all I can do. It's been a while now, and things are okay. Not perfect, not even close, but okay. I'm getting used to this new life, this new normal. The kids are adjusting more than I thought they would, and I'm starting to figure out how to be just a dad again, without all the emotional baggage of being married. Jessica? We don't talk much. Just the bare minimum about the kids. She still does the guilt thing now and then, like she's trying to make me feel bad for walking away. But it doesn't hit me the way it used to. I've learned to just ignore it. I still don't know if I'll ever get over the whole thing, or if I even should get over it. I think I'm just learning to live with it. I don't think I'll ever look at her the same way. And I'm okay with that. Maybe that's the hardest part, realizing that some things can't be fixed. I'm not in a rush to date again. Honestly, I'm still figuring myself out. I'm trying to rebuild trust, not just in people, but in myself. Some days are better than others, but I'm starting to feel like I'm healing. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I'm finally learning how to take care of myself. And that's enough for now.